you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, certainly can.
Awesome. Hey, how are you?
Doing good, doing good. Of
Thanks for making the time to do this with me today.
course, yeah. I always like to do, support fellow podcasters and, all that kind of stuff.
This is so sick, dude. I've actually been wanting to talk to you. I think I hit you up like a year ago before I even started doing this. You were like one of the first people that I wanted to talk to. I actually
Oh,
found you through your podcast. So,
oh,
you know, so I'm a fan. Been a fan for a little while now. I
well, that's awesome. I appreciate that.
Yeah, dude. I think I was looking for like a black metal podcast on Spotify. So I just looked up like a black metal something and everything went black popped up. And I was like, "Oh, this looks cool. Let me check it out." So I checked it out and I was pleasantly surprised by your content. I like how eclectic it is. You kind of do a little bit of everything and I don't know, I just kind of thought it would be really interesting to get to know you as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I love black metal, but the podcast covers a lot of different bases, and we talk about all sorts of stuff, and got a lot of different types of guests on there, and I figured that there'd be a lot of other shows out there that can devote themselves specifically to black metal. So I keep it general. Keeps everything interesting, and you run out of things to talk about eventually if you just stick to one subject.
Would you consider it more of like a personal project for you?
Well, I mean, I think as it stands, I got about 209 episodes right now. So it's kind of run the gamut of a lot of different things. Like some of it's, it gets kind of autobiographical. Some of it gets focused on the guests, and has almost more of a, I would say, like journalistic
Yeah.
standpoint, when I'm interviewing people. And then lately, I've been doing a lot of shows with Randy Larson and Ralph Schmidt, two really close friends of mine. And Randy is was in that band Cable, and he's playing in Grief now, which is the an old sludge band. And Ralph is in a German band called Ultha, black metal band. And but we don't talk about black metal. We talk about movies and
I know.
records.
Yeah,
It's
I know
cool.
that's kind of what I do here too. It's like people kind of always expect it to be like just about the music, but I don't know. I'm just a curious cat, I guess, and I like to get to know the musicians like as individuals and not just like, oh, this guy that I idolize on stage, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I get enough grimness in like writing songs. So it's like, the material that we do in the band and Tombs is pretty dark, and I get to write about all sorts of dark topics and you know cosmic angst and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So it's cool to do something different creatively that is a little bit more, I guess, in some ways, a little bit more lighthearted, even though we get into some heavy topics, like especially right, especially now, freedom of speech and
Mhm.
that sort of stuff is a pretty big topic that we've been discussing. It's a little bit of a heavy topic, but we try to keep it like accessible and people can enjoy themselves and don't feel like they're getting yelled at or anything like that.
I don't think you yell at people. I think you're pretty fucking reasonable with with your opinions and what you think
Right,
about.
but these days, people are all about attacking everyone these days. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to just, I want to, I just, mainly I want to have reasonable discussions. I don't want to be yelled at, right?
Right.
I don't want anyone to attack me, and I don't want to attack anyone, unless they deserve it, really. And,
Right.
and I feel like the art of conversation, but maybe through social media, maybe Twitter and Facebook have like destroyed the art of conversation, and I think that
Yes.
that's kind of like what I'm trying to promote with the podcast is just to have a dialogue about things. I mean, I don't know, I don't have all the answers. I don't, I only know I have a finite base of knowledge. I try to be open to stuff, but like, you know, but I also don't want to be attacked about things if I say, something that someone's offended. I don't want to offend. I personally don't want to offend anyone, but I'm not afraid of offending anybody because
Right.
that's not a right. It's not your right to be not offended. If you
Right.
don't like something, then don't consume it. Don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I don't understand why people have to like make such a such a big deal about things that they don't agree with. You know what I mean? And especially with this whole cancel culture thing going on, it's like you really can't fucking say anything without offending somebody. And it's like, why don't you just not listen to my fucking show or my
Yeah,
music
totally.
or whatever, you know? It's
Yeah,
stupid.
and it's like a very, I mean, it's by definition, it's narcissism, where like
Yeah.
people want everyone, they just want to see reflections of themselves. And I understand, like the last 4 years, this country has really been through
A lot.
like a very, very bad time politically, socially, culturally. I mean, I think that, everyone's at each other's throats right now, and everyone's like super defensive, and I get it, but you can't like there's tons of things that are going on in the world that I 100% don't agree with, but I'm not going to like tell people they can't express themselves, but so otherwise if you tell somebody that they can't express themselves and you censor them, then they become these weird martyrs, and then they're victims. And that's the last thing you want to do. You don't want to create like an energy like that with people that you don't agree with,
Exactly.
because you just want them to be able to express themselves freely, and you can debate them over the topics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was just listening to Jackie's new episode today. Actually, I found his episode through or his show by listening to you because you guys were talking
Oh,
about I think Gorgoroth in one of your episodes. You were
oh yeah,
doing
that was a while back. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that was fucking cool. And I was like, dude, Black Metal Podcast, let me check it out. So shout out to Into the Necrosphere. He's always been really supportive of this too. When I started out, he's like, don't quit your podcast, keep doing it. And I was like, thanks, Jackie. Cause I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm new to all this technology and whatnot. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get a little bit of interviews under my belt before I hit up like Mike or somebody that I really, really admire. Not to say I haven't admired my other guests. I'm so grateful for them. But
Well, the only way to learn is by doing, really. So there you go.
yeah. Well, I'm curious, like what made you get into podcasting?
Well, back in the day, when there wasn't really a lot of podcasts, I used to listen to this horror podcast called the Midnight Podcast. And it was like this one dude who did it by himself. And he just talked about zombie movies and zombie fiction and all that. And I was like, I was commuting for work, and I was just like, man, this guy, like, I can't believe that he's just by himself, like talking, and I'm like, that's so hard, I imagine, you know what I mean? So, and then I discovered, the Joe Rogan experience, and
Love Joe.
and I like the whole idea of conversation and and writing and using words and using language and stuff. So yeah, so I just started doing it mainly because like I was thinking, well, Rogan's like, he's a comedian, I don't particularly think he's that intelligent, really. And I was like, well, hell, man, I think
If
I
you
know
could do it,
more
I can
about the
fucking
world
do
than he
it.
does. So, no, I mean, nothing against Rogan, but he does definitely come off like there's things he knows a lot about, and there's things that he knows absolutely nothing about. And I think it's a little bit irresponsible to talk about some of that stuff. I think.
Yeah.
But, I'm not. Once again, you know, good for him. He's awesome. He's created like such a huge, successful, business for himself, and that's great. But I select what episodes I listen to these days by him. But he definitely was a big, influence on the way I try to do things and have a free form, kind of approach to it. And then of course, Henry Rollins, like someone that has been a huge impact in my life, and as far as like motivation and inspiration, and even further than that, like Lenny Bruce, who, I'm not really a big comedy fan, but Lenny Bruce is like a more almost like a spoken word, free form sort of guy, and
Yeah.
all that stuff kind of informed what I did, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, he's really revered in the whole comedy circle. And I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of Henry Rollins. I actually want to get him on this show at some point too. That's like my
Yeah.
goal. That'd be
I
really
mean,
fucking cool.
yeah, I mean, I've interviewed Rollins a few times, and mostly
You
for
have
print publications, and like, yeah, like stuff on the, like I think, uh, I don't know if you ever read Brooklyn Vegan, but I interviewed for him for that like a long time ago, and yeah, there's been miscellaneous outlets online that I've interviewed him for, like mostly written articles, and
hmm
I think all I did is just email him, so yeah, just email him. He's one of these guys who's like always down to like communicate with people. So
Yeah, he seems like really cool and down to earth. It's funny, a lot of the people that have been wanting to interview, I've been looking up like other interviews for research purposes, and they are all so humble. Like Tom G. Warrior, humble as fuck. Carl Sanders, humble as fuck. They're like, yeah, we're just some guys from Florida, from Switzerland. Like, I don't even know why people like my music. And I'm like, dude, are you kidding? You're like a fucking god. What are you talking about? Like fucking Celtic Frost? Are you kidding? But so for sure, I want to hit them up too.
Yeah,
But anyway,
especially Conjure Warrior, man. I'm a huge, Frost, Hellhammer, Triptychon, like
yeah,
all that
yeah,
stuff.
he's a big influence for your music with tunes, right?
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
we wouldn't exist without any of those bands, really. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think Frost, like Celtic Frost, was really they kind of were like the template, I think, for a lot of things, including hardcore and black metal, death metal, doom, like all these bands. And he mixed like later on, like the way he mixed in like like female vocals and more like gothic like sort of sounds, and it was even like I think Celtic Frost might even been like a precursor to bands, like My Dying Bride and that sort of stuff, which I love too,
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So yeah, it's huge, huge influence.
You also have a lot of different influences, like from the gothic rock scene, like Bauhaus and Joy Division. I know you're a huge fan of Swans, which I think is super cool,
Oh
and
yeah.
Neurosis. So I thought that was really interesting, like how you incorporate those elements into your music with tunes, because it's still like I know you don't like to define it, but one would consider it metal, obviously,
Yeah.
but with all these different like types of elements, kind of like Celtic Frost would do. So I thought that was always really cool about your project.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're metalheads, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like even I've always been the first thing I liked musically when I was a kid was metal. I mean, I wasn't one of these like punk rock types really, I mean, and even though I did play in punk rock and hardcore bands, it's like I was still very much it was more the metal stuff. Like the hardcore bands I like sound like metal bands, and I
Yeah.
wanted to play metal, but I just wasn't good enough technically to play in a band that sounded like Overkill or Slayer or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, it's first and foremost, we're metalheads and we love playing fast. We like riffs, we like heaviness. But it's cool that over the years I've really tried to incorporate other styles of music that I like, and Swans, Bauhaus, Fields of the Nephilim, like that
Oh,
sort of stuff, you know. And yeah, that's always been the goal is to try to do something different, like on all the records we make.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What got you into metal? Like, how old were you when you first bought your first metal record or tape or whatever?
I was probably, let's see, um, yeah, probably like maybe 12. I think we had a friend of the family. They had a kid my age, and then they had like a guy who was a couple years older, and he was like into Kiss and Judas Priest, Sabbath, and all that. And actually, there was another friend of the family, this dude who lived down the street, and he had like an older sister, and her boyfriend was living there, and he had like this incredible record collection. And I'd already heard Heaven and Hell by Sabbath.
Nice.
But that's what I thought Black Sabbath sounded like with Ronnie James Dio, which I love. I mean, I love Dio in the band too.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll. And I was like, wow, this is like, I never heard anything like this before. And that was what really like, because, I loved horror. I was like watching Hammer horror films and, Dracula and like Frankenstein and
So you were already a
all that.
creepy kid.
Yeah, I was already like a weird, creepy kid. And that just brought both worlds together in a way that I was like, man, this is like exactly the kind of, comic books, like, reading eerie and creepy and all that stuff. And yeah, it's like, it just made sense for me. Like and then that was it. After I heard We Sold Our Souls, I was all in. I said Scorpions, like UFO, Slayer, well, later on Slayer, Metallica and stuff like that. And, but yeah, I was never able to I never really took guitar lessons. I just kind of picked it up. And, around that time, people were like starting bands. And I was like, well, I wish I could play like Harry King, and James Hetfield, but like I can't. So I'm going to play like Johnny Ramone, or something like that. And that's, the punk the sort of cross section of like punk and metal was right around that time for me too. And I heard Bad Brains and like Circle Jerks and Black Flag and like all that stuff. And Black Flag to me sounded like slowed down or sped up Black Sabbath, and
Yeah.
like My War and all that stuff was like really, really big for me. And that kind of molded like all of the things I've ended up doing in my life, I think really boils down to that. And then yeah, like this summer I graduated high school, I had this girlfriend who was and she's like one of these like punk, like goth, chicks. And she liked The Cure and like Bauhaus and George, but also she was like punk as fuck too, like she's
Yeah.
really into like, like Black Flag and Ramones and all that stuff. And that at first I was like, yeah, I don't know how I feel about this music, you know what I mean? And but then like it started sinking in, and especially like Disintegration by The Cure, it's like such a heavy record. And after I got over like the initial like knuckleheaded point of view that I had, I was able to really appreciate that. And then several years later, I started really getting into like post-punk and all that, and I discovered the Swans, and it's been all about like all that stuff for most of my life, really.
What do you think draws you to music like that?
Well, I'm an only child, so as growing up, I spent a lot of time by myself, and you kind of create these landscapes for you to like roam around in by yourself, and I was always really into like like I said, horror and just kind of dark stuff, and I remember seeing Peter Murphy in The Hunger, that movie. And it was Bauhaus was like in the beginning where they're in this like really cool like nightclub and everyone's wearing sunglasses inside and smoking cigarettes and everything. And he's performing Bela Lugosi's Dead, and I'm like, man, this is like
Sick
really cool. It's like vampires and drinking blood and like the undead and everything. And it's cool music. And I was like, and there's like really, really great looking girls and stuff. And I was like, this is great, man. This is totally cool. And yeah, and it's just, that whole thing, like that was like part of my, what attracted me to like, just dark music, and I think that, that kind of like expanded out into metal, I mean, not, metal is very dark as well. And, Sabbath has like a gothic horror vibe to it. And, not so much, I mean, then I really got into bands like Birthday Party and the Gun Club and all this sort of stuff. And, and that informs the stuff I end up doing as well. There's like, Nick Cave and all that. And he just wrote really cool lyrics, and like,
yeah, he's a cool.
His lyrics they're not even really lyrics. Just, I know that he probably put a lot of intention into it, but it's like, he's just up there going nuts. Like it's this primal, very, very animalistic delivery. And, I responded to that too. Like this very primal, like kind of animalistic, like expression,
Do you feel like it's just something that resonated with your soul personally?
I think so. Like that whole physicality to it, it's like, I mean, people don't necessarily think of that style of music as physical, but it's like, like an emotional manifestation of like performing. Like I remember watching, I mean, I've never seen the Birthday Party, they were definitely a little bit before my time, but like, watching videos of those guys playing, it's just like this, super intense physical thing, like Iggy Pop was like that too. It's like taking this a sort of intellectual thing, like creating music, writing music, like making music is like sort of an intellectual pursuit, writing lyrics and all that. But then like filtering it through like this like physical, like animal, brutality, and like projecting that out on stage is really like what I like about extreme music in general, how it's, there's like technique involved and, all this other stuff, but it's also at the end of the day, it's like this very physical, immediate sort of thing, and that's, that's something that I've always really been drawn to. Like even when as a spectator and like a fan, like music that gets a physical reaction out of me is the kind of stuff that I really like,
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's all about finding something that makes you feel something. Like if it's just pleasing to the ear, it's not enough. Like, I really have to feel it inside my fucking heart. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of metalheads feel that way too. Like, I notice when you compare like a metalhead to a person who likes regular jack off music like pop or whatever, they have no fucking passion. They have no fucking soul. It's just something that they can tap their foot to. You know what I mean? But metalheads like will fucking die for it. Will bleed for it. You know what I mean? Like we're just so fucking passionate about it. Why do you think that we're so fucking passionate about it? Like why are we this way? I can't put my finger on it.
That's a really good point, you know, and I think a lot of it is the fact that people that are drawn to this stuff are like kind of outsiders, you know what I mean? Like, you know, of course, like you go to some of the, you know, some shows, there are some styles of metal that, you know, attract or appeal to people who are like a little bit more well adjusted, I guess. But like, but in general, like if you're attracted to this kind of thing, you're like you're an outsider, and you're like you kind of relate more to the musicians because they're also outsiders. They also have the same ideas. They're also, you know, there's less of a barrier between the creator and the enjoyer of the creation. You know what I mean? Like when you go to a metal show, for the most part, everyone's pretty approachable. I mean, you can talk to people, and you know, and that's really the difference between, you know, going to see Lady Gaga or something like that, you know, and it's like, you know, she's like on a different realm, completely different type of person, different, you know, and I'm not saying that she doesn't have her, you know, whatever things, but it's just, there's a very distinct separation between her and her audience. You know, she's not hanging out at the merch table, like talking to people, or, you know, you're not going to see her in the parking lot after the show, like, you know,
Sure.
by her van or something like that, you know, and that's kind of like what, you know, metal is more like that now than it's, I mean, maybe back in like the 70s with like Led Zeppelin playing at like, you know, stadiums, it was different. But, you know, the filtering of like after thrash, which was like a filtering of like heavy metal through like hardcore and punk, I think that sort of ideology like is more front and center with metal now. Because a lot of people I think have like that background in punk and hardcore, and as well as like listening to Iron Maiden and, you know, Judas Priest and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the best things about listening to this kind of music is that people are generally easy to communicate with, such as, you know, me talking to you right now.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
like you're saying, you can meet them at the merch table or outside of a show. I like to be one of those people that are waiting after hours too. And I think I had met Eric Danielson from Watain at a show also. He was at the merch table and he was just walking backstage, and I was like, "Hey, Eric." You know, he turns around, he's like, "Yes." And I'm like, can I like get a picture with you, man? Like, and he was so cool, you know, he was so fucking nice. And when he's on stage, he's totally this like brutal fucking blood covered satanic animal. And you wouldn't think that he would be approachable. But a lot of us are actually, I mean, look at me, for fuck's sake. I don't look approachable, but I'm a really nice guy, you know? Most of us are. So I really love that about our culture. So you were doing Necromaniacs before you started doing Everything Went Black?
No, actually, that came along sort of midstream because the first Everything Went Black episode was with Mike, my co-host,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
we
I
went to
fucking-
that was the first episode. I don't even know if I should repost that because I think it got lost in the annals of Apple Podcasts somewhere. But yeah, Mike and I went to go see the Serbian film at this theater in Brooklyn called the Alpine, which is like a regular theater where they were showing like the Thor movie there too. And we went to go see the Serbian film, and we did a podcast at a diner afterwards. And then I was like, okay, cool, we did this. Now what? You know, now, and that's, so then I continued with it when everything went black. But then I'm like, you know, Mike and I, horror guys, you know, into comics and all this sort of stuff. So, you know, we decided to start doing a horror podcast, and we did it for a couple of years, but we weren't really consistent the way we are now. Now we do it every week. So, you know, it's way cooler when you're consistent, and like, I think the listeners appreciate it, so they don't have to like, you know, wait and maybe something comes out this month, or maybe it doesn't, or maybe we take like 3 months off or whatever, which is what was happening. Like we were taking these long periods of time off between episodes. And yeah, if I was going to do it, I'd rather just do it regularly. So that's the thing I learned about working with Gimme Radio when I was doing Metal Matters, is that keeping to a schedule and having it released the same time every week is really important these days. So that's what we ended up doing with Necro and with Everything Went Black.
Yeah, that's something that I need to get onto. I ended up accidentally taking a break for like a month or two, and I was like, fuck, I need to get back on it. And oh, I was gonna ask you, you were doing like an occult podcast for a little while. I think it was part of the Everything Went Black.
Yeah, there was a few episodes of that. Night Talk, I think it was
Night
called.
Talk, yeah. I wasn't sure if it was like, I knew it was night watch, night something, but yeah, that was fucking cool, man. What happened to that?
It's just hard to find people that I didn't want to just grab anyone and talk to them about it. Like I selected people who I knew were legit,
Yeah.
And I guess I don't know as many people that are legitimate that I wanted to talk to that would be good episodes as I thought I did. So that's why I didn't continue with that. But that is something that, like, it'd be really cool to continue that in some form. Maybe like down the line, like maybe like a season or something. I'll produce like maybe like 6 or 8 episodes in one shot and then release them over a period of time. But it was hard to like really come up with concepts and find people. I mean, I had tons of ideas. I just couldn't find people who were knowledgeable in those things that were, legitimate sources. Like everyone I talk to has like published books out and
Right.
have like a verifiable background, So
Yeah.
I just didn't want to grab someone out there who's into like, Santa Muerte, who like, yeah, I'm all about it. They're like fake. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
you
I
should
don't know.
talk to fucking Damien Eccles, dude. That'd be sick.
Love to.
Yeah,
He's someone that's on my list actually of people to reach out to. And
me too.
yeah, I mean, I used to work at this place in New York called Enchantments, and he's come in there a bunch of times, but I never met him though. And
Oh,
I know people that we have common friends, but like, I want to have like a very solid, very well constructed idea to pitch him rather than just like, hey man, I want to talk to you. It's like he must get like requests like that constantly.
right.
So I wanted to really write up like some kind of treatment of what I wanted to discuss with him and put it out there. Because I haven't read his most recent book, but I read his other books.
Yeah, I did too. Well, actually, I think I had gotten the audiobooks. I don't know. It's easier for me to retain information when I listen to stuff versus trying to read it. But yeah, he's somebody that I like really, really fucking look up to. I watch his YouTube videos all the time. And then I'm actually going to be joining his Patreon because he's going to be opening up a magic school in fucking Mississippi or no, New Orleans. Sorry. But
Cool.
yeah, he's going to actually like open up like a physical fucking magic school, which is the sickest fucking shit. I'm like, dude, I gotta go at some point because I don't know. I identify more with like left hand path type stuff. So even though he works with like, the Enochian magic and the angel stuff, I don't know, somehow the way that he teaches it still resonates with me. Like, cause he still has all these practical magical skills that he teaches you, like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram or certain types of meditations. I don't know. It's just something that resonates with me really deeply. And then obviously like his whole fucking story is just phenomenal. Like what he went through and was able to overcome and still be like this incredible human being is just phenomenal. But anyway, tangent.
Yeah, I mean, that guy faced death, really. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
he basically manifested his way out of jail,
Yeah.
out of the death row, for sure.
Are there any types of magical practices that you like to partake in? I think you had mentioned something about reading tarot before. Or...
Yeah, it's the thing is though, it's like, I when I moved out to New Jersey about a year ago, but like when I was the whole time I lived in New York, I was around people like that were involved in some kind of magic or some sort of practice, and joining groups has never really been my thing, So I mean, I got a little bit into tarot, I got into like the sort of thelemic stuff, Aleister Crowley, the Enochians, angels and all that sort of stuff, and like left hand path, chaos magic and all that. But like none of it really is something that is I sort of pick and choose, I guess, from those things. At the end of the day, I guess like the thing that I find most useful is you know, putting an intention, using intentions, you know, and visualization, which is a huge part of magic. And also certain things like scents and colors and sigils and things like that. And if I have like a certain goal and I utilize those things in like more of like a ceremony or like a ritual, and, you know, I'll like make a candle, you know, with like, you know, the sigils on it, and
Cool.
charge it with some sort of intention and burn it. And that's part of the whole thing. And so that's not really any one particular practice, but it's sort of, it even like, I mean, even candle magic is part of more of like a, almost like a Santeria sort of practice, you know, but I don't identify with like Caribbean religions or anything like that.
Right.
So, I mean, you know, it's like I guess like a, you know, going to a Chinese restaurant, you pick from different columns of like the things that
Right.
that work for you, you know, and that's, I was very much more into like Thelema than I was, or Thelema, like a few years ago. But you can only go so far without joining a lodge or something like that. And like that was like exactly what I didn't want to do, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing against anyone who is into that, you know. That's definitely your path, you know, but it's not really my path, is to be part of a group or anything. And that's, you know, that's just where I've always been reluctant to have any kind of connection with groups, you know, and that goes back to just being a kid, I guess, and, you know, just being on an outsider all the time, you know.
Yeah.
And like following rules and like none of that shit, you know.
Yeah. You kind of just like to be independent and forge your own path.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, I'm a student of that, you know. Like I read about it, you know, and like tarot, I never got any good at reading cards necessarily, but you know, there's like, there was that 78, there's a book that everyone reads. I read that a few years ago, and it's like how to interpret all the, you know, the different arcanas and like what the cards mean and all that. But I'm like, you know, I can't, if we were to do like a reading, I couldn't do that really, you know. But I'd pull like 3 cards for myself, you know, in the morning or something, or if there's a particular time of like a period where I need to like accomplish something, or if I'm looking for some sort of guidance, if I have like, you know, some sort of goal or decisions to make or whatever, or some difficult period, it's like I'll pull cards in the morning and like, you know, look at them. Like I'm not looking, oh yeah, you know, a week from now I'm going to get money or something. It's like, which is what a lot of people if you go to a magic shop like enchantments, that's what people want to hear. They want to go in there, they want you to carve them a candle. It's always about money. It's always about getting a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever. Those are the two biggest things people want. They never want you to give them the tools to acquire those things, you know?
Right.
So I guess for me, like a long-winded answer, and I'm kind of going off topic, but it's like, for me, I'd rather have the tools to do these things than actually have like a bag of money on the sidewalk or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that says more longevity. Like you can capitalize more on that. Like that's investing in yourself. If you develop tools to make yourself successful, you know, whatever that means, you know, skills to do whatever. And so I mean, like looking at the cards, so you kind of it's not like like every day is a new message, but over like say a week or two, you kind of see the trend. Like I'll take a picture of everything and I'll look and see, well, okay, well, it's interesting that, you know, these cards came up, you know, what is that telling me? You know, like, you know, it's just one sort of tool that I use to widen my like consciousness of what's going on in the world and in the universe. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't rule anything out, I guess, is like what I'm saying. It's like some people are so 100% convinced that we live in like a material world, which we might, you know. I mean, I have my own ideas about that, you know. And then some people are like way off, you know, in the ether somewhere, you know, and this all reality is all subjective and all this stuff, which it is, you know. But you know, I do believe there are like things that we don't understand that are going on in the world, and I think that a lot of it has to do, a lot of this magic is like intention based, and even if it isn't actually manifesting some power from somewhere else, even if that power is coming from inside of yourself, you know, then it's worthwhile pursuit, you know, even if all I'm doing is lighting incense and burning candles, and I have like, you know, symbols around me and it makes me feel a certain way. To me, that's still magic because you're going inward and you're pulling out the resources that you need to accomplish your goals, you know, and that's, yeah, that's one way of looking at it. And that works too. That fits the definition, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think at least for me, the whole pursuit of magic is finding that power within myself and bringing it to fruition to create not only the reality that I want in this plane of existence, but also to elevate my state of consciousness, which is like a big thing that Damien Eccles teaches. Basically, he's trying to get himself to a place where his consciousness remembers where he is once his body dies. So it's not, you know, caught in the reincarnation cycle again, which is something that I don't know if I'll be able to achieve in this lifetime, but it's definitely something that I would like to be able to do.
Well, you know, the Hindus believe that you keep going on and on.
Yeah. Well, that's like a whole different like belief system. I don't know why. I can't tell you why that's something that resonates with me, but I just feel there's that saying that you're an old soul, you know?
Yeah.
And I definitely fucking feel that like in my gut. I feel like this hasn't been my only life, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a valid way to feel. You know, I mean, there are things in my life that, you know, I feel like I might have experienced things before. You know, and also like there are also moments where I feel like there's like, you know, like maybe I slipped somewhere in the multiverse too, where there's like some other version of myself out there in a different multiverse that's like,
right.
and somehow like the veil like got really thin and those two lives like intersected, and I came back into my own sort of plane. You know, I felt that for sure over the course of my lifetime, you know.
Have you come across your doppelganger yet?
Um, no, I don't think so. I mean, you know, I don't, I haven't seen anyone that I'm like, oh yeah, that looks, you know, that's me, you know. It's like, you know, I don't know. Not to my knowledge, at least.
Okay. So a big portion of this show is, you know, getting personal with people and talking about mental health. And I had mentioned that to you earlier. Do you feel comfortable talking about any of your experiences with that? I know you had mentioned that this last year was particularly difficult for you. Do you
Sure.
want
Yeah. No, it's important to talk about that. I mean, I think, you know, like during the whole pandemic, I tried to put out like an episode every month of just like every few weeks, and a lot of that had to do with like just feelings of despair and like managing and, you know, like showing other people, like maybe demonstrating to other people that, you know, everyone's going through like hardships emotionally and doubts and fears and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I mean, there have been, I mean, when you try to do things in life and, you know, like for every inch of progress I've made, I feel like I've had like 2 miles of failures, you know. So trying to do something that's out of the box, that's not a, you know, a by the numbers sort of lifestyle. You leave yourself open to, you know, to failure and frustrations and all that sort of stuff. And it's, you know, it definitely erodes your psyche sometimes. And, you know, especially when a lot of those decisions you make to pursue things put you in a very compromised position when it comes to like resources and security and all this other stuff. And, you know, like I spent like an entire year of just being completely, and I'm not even talking about the pandemic. I'm talking about other years in my life where there's been like hardly any income and just like piecing things together. And you're like, where did I go wrong? You know, like what, yeah, I thought about giving up, you know, and then there were moments where I was like, you know, what's the point of living? You know, it's like, because the idea of giving up on things that I wanted to do in life meant that I would have had to take on like another life. And that to me felt like a slow death, you know, and then you start, well, you know, oh yeah, I'm only going to live like another 40 years. So, you know, I can do that, you know, then I die, you know, and it's like, and then that sort of, that train of thought was like, maybe if it's not 40 years, maybe if I only live for 20 years, I can make it if I'm not doing the things I love.
right?
And then you're like, well, fuck it. It's like, why live, you know?
Yeah.
And that, like, that sort of, you disharmony is like a really dangerous place to be in. And I guess one of the things that helped get me through that was, I mean, I go to therapy too. I mean, I see it, I have a complete therapist, and it's like, unfortunately, I wasn't in therapy at that time because I didn't have any money or benefits or anything like that. But the, having friends and feeling comfortable to talk to them about these topics was really the lifesaver, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, not feeling that you have to project some image of like strength or some like macho bullshit, or like, it's like, yeah, well, I'm invincible, like, no one, nothing, I can make it through anything, whatever. But like, that's all bullshit that people feed themselves, and like, you need to like understand that you can't go it alone, and that you have to open yourself up to other people, and you have to allow people to help you. And that's always been like a struggle for me. And and I think that if I had been more open to doing that, I might not have even gone into these weird spirals that I've gone into over the course of my life either.
Right.
But having failed and having to like pull myself up out of that, pit many, many times, I started realizing that, like, as much as I like don't feel like there's anyone else out there, there are people there, and like friends and people who care about me. And that's like, that's like the biggest realization, I think, is to look outward at your circle and your family and understand that there are people who care, and it's not just you against the world and this void of existence that we live in or whatever. And like, and not have all that existential stuff like get you down, and I think, that's like always been a big battle for me. And then of course the last 15 months or so, it's been exacerbated because, I live here by myself, it's like I moved out of New York City, and, and being alone, like I didn't plan on being alone all the time. Like I was like, yeah, this is a great town to like hang out in at night, go on tour, come home. This is great. But to 24/7 being like by myself, and like everything becomes like this weird like reflection, you know what I mean? Like you think about the world outside, and you're reading the news, and you're watching, stuff on TV, and you're just like, is any of this really happening? Like, did I die? Did I already die? And is this some weird purgatory that I'm in that never ends? Am I gonna be stuck in this like realm before I like ascend into some other place? It's like there were times where I really did feel like I was living in this like weird Jacob's ladder. Like maybe this whole year has been like those milliseconds before my consciousness like left my body, and of course that creates like a lot of disharmony in your life. And I've had to call people, and I had to be like, hey man, are we in the same reality? Like, am I alive? Did I die? Like I've had to like connect with people, and just to reaffirm the fact that we're all still here, and it's like, it's been a really hard time, and that luckily this past year I was back in therapy, and it was great, and I was able to have my weekly check-in with my therapist and discuss all these things, and as well as all the other myriad of like emotional hangups that I've had and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's timely that you're doing this thing, because I think everyone has had to, face a lot of their fears and anxieties, and had to deal with like depression and, this sort of like existential like pressure,
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for opening up about going to therapy specifically, because I feel like there's a huge stigma attached to that still in this day and age, and especially with men, which I think is completely fucking bullshit. Like, and especially in the metal community, we kind of have to admit there's this whole I hate using the term, I really do. But the whole toxic masculinity thing is an issue, I would say, because a lot of guys feel like they can't open up about these types of things because it makes them less macho, or, oh, I gotta be brutal all the time because I'm in a fucking death metal band, or fucking whatever, you know what I mean? So I think part of the reason why I created this was because I felt like it was really important for people to understand that that musicians that they probably idolize are actually very human and are going through the same hardships that you're going through, especially right now. You know what I mean? Like I had this idea before the pandemic happened, just because I've always been very open about my struggle with mental health and depression. And just the complete and utter isolation that you feel is so devastating sometimes, you know? It's really what draws people over the edge. You know, that's why people take that leap, or however you want to say it, because they feel so completely and utterly alone. And I just think it's so fucking important to let everybody know that, hey, you're not alone in these feelings. You're not alone in this fucking sorrow. And especially this last year, you weren't alone in your suffering, which is something that I really, really appreciated you doing with the Plague Diaries on Everything Went Black. Like you were basically documenting your struggle with the whole dealing with the whole fucking pandemic. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that shit was rough, man. That shit was rough, and I'm so glad that we're almost at the end of it. Like we can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, tours are starting to get booked, and shows are starting to open up again. We're having a bit of local shows over here. I'm in Ohio, you're in Jersey. I don't know what's going on out there. But over here things are returning back to normal. You can wear your mask or not, you know, it's kind of like an optional thing. Um but yeah, um so I'm just really grateful for people that are willing to be strong enough to be vulnerable, because vulnerability is a strength, contrary to what people believe. You know, they think it's a weakness to feel anything, which is so stupid, because it's like that's what makes us fucking human, you know, and that's what connects us. So thank you for being open about that.
No, it's my pleasure. You know, and like I said, like, the Plague Diary episodes were pretty much, a way of doing that because, through a lot of that, I was just completely by myself here, and without, no one wanted to do anything. There was nowhere to go. There was nothing to do, and like I said, I'm, I was just coming out of a relationship right at the beginning of the pandemic. And, it's like everyone around me down here had like their families and, wives or girlfriends or whatever. And, it was just, me going solo down here. And it was just very mentally more taxing than I thought it would be, actually, because,
Yeah.
I like you tell yourself, it's like, yeah, I like being alone, I don't like people, like all this other stuff. But you'd be surprised, like, of the, I'm not going to name names, but there are people that I'm like, wow, I'm surprised you feel that way, that you miss people,
Yeah.
like some of the most, misanthropic like dudes are like telling me like, oh, I miss shows because I just want to see people. And I'm like, yeah, me too, for sure. But it's like, yeah, it was, there was no distractions, I guess. Like, and so just in and of itself, the pandemic is hard. But in normal life, prior to the pandemic, all these other issues were easy to put on the back burner because I was always going somewhere. Like there was always, oh yeah, 3 months from now we're going on the road, come home. Oh, we got another tour book. It's like there was always like a year of stuff to do ahead of me that we were planning to do. And when I was home, I was busy with work and doing podcasts and this and that and all that. But now luckily I still kept my job, but like when everything is shut down and you're just left with all this like open time, it's just your mind just goes to creates like all this stuff, and I guess like, the other real like, sort of challenges to calm your mind down too, so that your mind doesn't spin out of control either, and it's like some people talk about, oh, meditation. I mean, I've never meditated, but I hear that that's like what that can help you do that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
but yeah, just understanding your thoughts too, that you might be thinking something, you might be feeling something, but that's a thought. It's not necessarily reality. You might be like, oh my God, this is never going to change. I'm fucked. Like, this is it. I'm going to die by myself in some fucking hole somewhere. That's a thought, but that's not, you have everything in your power to change that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's like, the times when I have felt like really extreme about certain things, like, yeah, maybe this is like, do I want to die like slowly and unsatisfied, or I just want to end it all and like, whatever. That the idea of being able to change the future is like, what backs you off of that ledge, I think, a lot of times, you know. And I think that, you know, and then you get into, well, all right, I want to change. So how do I change? It's like, I have to get help. I have to talk to people. I have to, like, you know, talk to a therapist or talk to my friends or whatever, you know.
So would that be like your advice in terms of having some sort of healthy coping mechanism?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they say meditation's great. I wouldn't know. I never did it, but I say they say that's a good way of calming your thoughts. But I think that the idea of like being able to change the future, being able to, you know, point yourself in a different direction. It's not going to be easy, but that knowledge should back you away from whatever really negative thoughts you're having about how you might want to not live anymore or any of these things. It's like, you know, you have options. There's always options. You know, it's like no one's telling you got to stick with the same plan all the time. You know, you can change things. And, you know, and a lot of it's stuff that's you don't want to do, man. Maybe like I know, you know, I mean, I'm going to talk about specific people and not name names, you know, but it's like there's like, well, you know, I don't want to get a real job because that means I have to do this and that. You know, it cuts me off from my creative process or whatever. And it's like, you know, hey, you want to be secure? Do you want to like live in a nice place? Do you want to not have to like borrow money from people all the time? That's a decision. You can choose to stay in this like spot of like always being in the negative, always being in a deficit, or you can look at the steps you need to take, you know, to like change things, you know. And it's not an overnight thing either. It's going to take a while, you know. And I mean, I've had to go through that myself, man. Like there's like, you know, little compromises you have to make in your life, but you have to do that like sort of in perspective with everything else, you know. And it's like, and then you look back and you're like, oh geez, you know, I really did make the right decision. You know, that at the time it was like it felt like an ultimate failure to make these decisions, but I see the good things that came from that. So yeah, it's just like you know, it's like one of those books, like Choose Your Own Adventure, you know, where it's like it's not your book, your life is not like a novel where there's an ending that's in mind. You can choose your own adventure and like, okay, well, I'm gonna go right instead of left. And that's like the most useful thing that I've been able to come away with, you know, with the last few years. Cause a lot of this stuff is really recent for me too, as far as like making life-changing decisions and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, I think to go back to something I believe Joe Rogan had said is like you have to think of yourself like you're a character in a story or like a lead character in your own movie. Like, how's this movie going? Well, it sucks. Well, what can I do to change it? How can I improve my situation? What can I do to develop my skills? Or, just to pave the path to have the life that I want. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people get stuck in this victim mentality when they're deep in the depths of depression. At least I know that I have often when I was younger, especially that you just feel like things are never going to change. They're always going to be the same. You're always going to be stuck in the situation. And I think it's really important what you're saying right now is that there is a possibility for change. Even though it feels like this moment will never end, it will eventually end. And your thoughts are just a thought. It's not necessarily the ultimate reality. Like you can take a moment to observe the thought and then overcome it and continue moving forward. You know what I mean? So
yeah, totally.
yeah. So I appreciate
You
you.
know, and it goes back to intention too. You know, you have to like,
Yeah.
you know, look at what your intentions are and like, you know, where do I want to be like next year or like 6 months from now or 2 years from now or whatever. And like, you know, you have to actually put the intention together to make the change, you know?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I think it's also really important to actually like write it down and make a plan. You know what I mean? Like that's what I did. I literally wrote a whole list last year of things that I wanted to accomplish and I accomplished actually most of those, which I'm really proud of. And then so I wrote a new list for this year and one by one you look at it every day and it kind of like you're able to check it off month by month as long as you're doing steps every day to achieve those goals, you know what I mean? And it gives you like this sense of purpose if you actually write down goals or create like a vision board or something like that. I know it seems kind of cheesy, but it can really, really help, for anybody that's struggling with your hopelessness right now. Like just really make a plan. Where do you want to be in life and what can you do every day? Baby steps, to achieve that plan. So
I think it's a great idea to put it in writing and, you know, graphic, you know, have some sort of graphic, like you were saying, a vision board or something. I think that's a great tool, you know, to use for this stuff.
yeah, yeah. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure talking to you and getting to know you a little bit. Maybe in the future, if you have any more time, we can get into some other types of discussions. Do you have anything that you'd like to plug for today?
Well, TOMBS is about to announce some dates for later in the year. We're going to be releasing I'm sure Season of Mist is going to get mad that I say this now, but like we're going to have like a single, I guess, coming out later in the year, right before the tour of like some new, actually one new song, like a bunch of ambient stuff and like a collaboration that I did with Dwid from Integrity and a couple of covers. And it's just to have something out there to take with us on the road and remind people that we didn't, disintegrate over the last 15 months.
Right.
And then of course, if you like podcasts and all that jazz, check out Everything Went Black on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and Necromaniacs if you're a fan of horror, exploitation, gore, and actually recently kind of more adjacent horror stuff like crime movies and things like that. So
yeah,
we
should have talked more about that. I didn't think about it. Fuck.
Next time we can get it.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much again for joining me today. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope you had a little bit of fun as well.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll see you guys on the road. Take care.
See you guys later. Bye.